Good morning and happy Friday. This is your early warning briefing for Friday, the 7th of February, 2025. I'm your host, Mark Nielsen. I'm joined by Jared and Mike. Robert is out today, but we will jump now right into Inside the Beltway. So the Trump administration intends to slash up to thousands of USAID jobs. Trump recently announced this. Trump administration officials recently announced this. And this would be about a 95% reduction in the overall workforce for U.S. aid. So following the announcement of this dramatic cut in the global workforce, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that U.S. aid will continue to deliver health and humanitarian aid in spite of these cuts, but complained that rank subordination had become a major problem at the agency. And then furthermore, USAID will be rolled up under the auspices of the State Department. And so from there, it appears that there will only be about 294 USAID employees around the world to deliver, to execute on USAID's mission moving forward. Moving on, the president will be establishing a religious discrimination task force. This news came following during the National Prayer Breakfast, in which Trump also said that he will be creating a White House faith office, and then direct Attorney General Pam Bondi to create a task force to rid the federal government of anti-Christian bias. Trump said that the task force will, quote, immediately halt all forms of anti-Christian targeting and discrimination within the federal government and fully prosecute anti-Christian violence and vandalism. All right, moving on. Mike, I know that we've been talking a lot about we've been talking a lot about Scott Bessent. Looks like that Scott Bessent also has he made an announcement of IRS being spared from some of these Doge investigations until after the filing season. What's going on over there?
Yep, you got it. IRS is going to be spared from the deferred resignation and also spared from the Doge Department of Government Efficiency operational reviews until after the filing season.
All right. And then moving on, it looks like the Senate voted along party lines yesterday to confirm Russell Vought to lead the Office of Management and Budget, OMB. Vought served as the OMB director during Trump's first term, and he is the founder of the conservative think tank Center for Renewing America. And he's also the co-author of the Heritage Foundation's controversial Project 2025. All right, so Vought is one of these, he's a longstanding Trump ally and official. He has been repeatedly criticizing what is the Impoundment Act of 1974. This act was passed during the very tail end of Richard Nixon's second term, which it prevents the president from refusing to spend appropriated funds from Congress. Vought has challenged to pledge the constitutionality of this law once in office. Now, in the past several weeks, Vought has been acting as an advisor to OMB. And so this Vought was instrumental in the Trump administration announcing a freeze on all federal grants and loan funding. Vought is also considered to be, according to congressional Democrats, the most dangerous man in Washington is how he's been described. Hawaii Senator Brian Schatz last night said that Russ Vought might as well be the most important man that no one's ever heard of. Schatz went on to say he wants to take an agency that people outside of Washington haven't even heard of and turn it into a nerve center and power center of the federal government. Now, my assessment is this is not just hot air. Russ Vought is not only a very aggressive intellectual within Trump's cabinet, but he will be holding one of the most important cabinet positions in this administration. Vought will be playing a critical role in realizing Trump's vision for reforming the federal government. Vaught's early efforts with OMB also signal that he will not only aggressively pursue Trump's agenda to starve and dismantle portions of the federal bureaucracy, but he will likely pave a way for this constitutional challenge to the Impoundment Act of 1974 that we talked about. So to give you a big picture on what that Impoundment Act, by challenging the constitutionality of the Impoundment Act or removing it, it would greatly enhance the power of the president to resist congressional spending and to be able to have a lot more latitude in stripping down the federal bureaucracy. And so it is very likely that Vought will push the limits of his authority as much as possible in order to create a constitutional challenge that would go up to the Supreme Court. And then if decided in favor of the administration, it would give Trump a considerable amount of power and authority to realize his agenda in stripping down the administrative state. And so Russ Vought is definitely someone to keep your eye on. It will be really interesting to see how he operates moving forward and how the Trump administration plans to strip down a lot of this excess funding that they've been identifying over the past several weeks. And finally, moving on, Jared, it looks like Trump has sanctioned the ICC, the International Criminal Court. What's going on there?
Yes. So President Trump laid sanctions on the ICC due to, quote, illegitimate and baseless accusations targeting America and Israel. President Trump further called on all of America's allies to oppose any ICC actions against the United States, Israel, or any other ally of the United States that has not consented to ICC jurisdiction. President Trump further banned any transfer of property to the ICC and banned any entry of any person, quote, employed by or acting as an agent of the ICC unless the Secretary of State determines them to not be detrimental to America's interests. So, I mean, well, as far as how I'm reading that, that basically means the ICC is being seen as a threat unless determined otherwise. Now, the order also removes any right to prior notification of asset seizure for the ICC personnel currently in America due to, quote, the ability to transfer funds or other assets instantaneously. Now, as far as why this matters, I think President Trump is likely undercutting any kind of international response to his agenda. And this is going to give President Trump's threats of force, such as, leaving the options for military acquisition of Greenland or Panama or actions against the cartels. It will give those threats of force considerably more weight as he's signaling that he will simply ignore the court where these would likely be taken up.
All right, thanks, Jared. And then in terms of hearings up on the Hill, we have nothing significant to report. But if we do have anything additional that takes place over the next 24 hours, we'll definitely be following those developments and relaying those back to you. All right, now let's move on to our roll-up. Mike, it looks like we have ICE and is expecting a little bit of border violence to escalate. What's going on there?
Yeah, this is something that Tom Homan has been talking about for a couple of weeks. He recently said, quote, do I expect violence to escalate? Absolutely, because the cartels are making record amounts of money. And Borders Czar Tom Homan continued saying that if U.S. service members down on the border are harmed by any cartel violence, that President Trump would, quote, wipe them off the face of the earth.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Jared, let's have you take us through the remainder of our roll-up items, please.
Absolutely. So a Texas-based power company said that they will be breaking ground on a brand new liquid natural gas power plant that will power 800,000 homes starting in 2028. There's a second strain of bird flu that was identified by the USDA, and it's leading to fears that the H5N1 infection could become endemic to North American birds. The Space Force and Japan launched their first joint national security satellite together. They expect a second payload, and this is going to help understand the space terrain over the Indo-Pacific. So we're seeing, again, an expansion of the space warfare domain via Japan and the United States. Turkey told Syria that they would delay a possible mutual defense pact until they can get Syria stabilized and remove the Kurdish forces. One of Greenland's parliamentarians proposed that they hold an independence vote in the next legislative session, which is as soon as this year. And ultimately, Greenland will still need a security partner in order to secure its borders, because they have less than 60,000 people in total, and they intend to still maintain their welfare state. So a lot of their money is going to that instead of defense. And lastly, British Columbia is fast-tracking mining and liquid natural gas in response to President Trump's tariff threats. Now, what this will do is it actually just basically get out of the way for government regulation in British Columbia for critical minerals, liquid natural gas, and precious metals in 18 different projects, which they're even generally bypassing the indigenous and environmental concerns. So once again, Trump's tariffs are having secondary effects of effectively skipping DEI concerns and enhancing the energy security for our allies.
All right, thanks, Jared. All right, now let's jump down into our warning items for the day. Mike, we've been getting reports of brown berets spotted in Dallas, Texas. What's going on?
Yeah, there's a self-proclaimed member of Brown Berets, which is a Latino immigrant rights group. Historically, they're a paramilitary organization. I'll get to that in just a second. But yeah, one of these members was recently quoted in Dallas, Texas, in the news being at an anti-ICE protest, and the activist was wearing kind of a signature red handkerchief covering her face. And that's, again, according to news reports. So the Brown Berets were initially this Latino or Chicano paramilitary group established in the late 1960s. And this was during the national, more regional Chicano movement. And they engaged in political activism with a notable focus on self-defense forces and housing protection. The original organization was later disbanded in the 1970s. But back from 2017 to 2020, we've seen several Brown Beret groups, kind of self-proclaimed Brown Beret groups, reemerge, and now apparently they're back active in Texas.
And Mike, do you see much coordination between these and the standard Black Bloc progressive anarchist groups? Are they kind of separate?
Yeah, I would rope that they all get roped into the larger kind of far left, so-called anti-fascist umbrella. But Brown Berets, they were active during these BLM protests. I would not call them like an Antifa type group, but yeah, they're definitely in the same umbrella.
Okay, thanks, Mike. All right, moving on, Jared. We'll hit the global warning items. So we were talking a little bit about before the show about Japan taking on a much larger role in the Asia Pacific, especially in terms of containing and resisting China. What's going on over there?
Yes, so Japan signed a $5 million agreement with Cambodia to ensure Cambodia's election security via election servers and cybersecurity equipment. The agreement also enhances Japan's control over Cambodia's cybersecurity for its banking and finance sectors, which gives Japan enormous control over Cambodia. Now, the reason this matters is Cambodia is one of China's closest allies. It's one of the only places that China has even a de facto overseas base. Japanese diplomacy is really important for bringing Asian Pacific nations away from China. And being that Cambodia is so close, we could actually see a peel off of Cambodia from China. And this is the latest indication that they are moving away after significant American agricultural investments into Cambodia and a very recent U.S. Navy port visit to Ream.
All right, thanks, Jared. And I know I brought this up yesterday, but I do think it's interesting to watch Japan right now economically. During a lot of the fluctuations that we've seen from, the threat of trade wars, and some of the markets have been really scared. We've seen a lot of changes in values on currency. Japan's been weathering the storm better than most other countries. They kind of have been an outlier in all of this. And so I do think that's significant as we kind of watch the world change and Japan continue to fill that role. All right, and finally, going back to Japan, Jared, looks like we've had a little bit of conflict between Russia and Japan diplomatically. What's going on there?
Yeah, well, hopefully it stays just diplomatic. So Russian foreign ministry officials said that they see no possibility of peace talks with Japan due to Japan's, quote, provocative military activities with the United States and other NATO member states near our far eastern shores. What they're talking about for peace talks, Russia and Japan never formally signed a peace agreement for World War II, so technically they are still at war. Russia's brought this up a couple times over the last 2 years. In addition to that, Russia's ambassador to Japan said that Russia is going to respond to Japan's sanctions asymmetrically. Japan just in January laid a few more sanctions onto Russia. Now, the reason this is important is that actually you can see it right here on the map, just at the top of, or right in the middle of the Sea of Japan, you can see Vladivostok. That's a major Russian naval base. And in the event of a Pacific war, Russia could launch a limited action with its Pacific fleet in order to tie up quite a few of Japan's forces. and they could, as justification, they could cite the sanctions and the open territorial dispute with the Kuril Islands, which you can see shooting off to the right of Japan there, and the fact that technically they are still at war, so they can just take these actions without really saying, "Hey, we're going to war now."
All right. Thank you, Jared. All right. Well, that takes us through to the end of our warning items for the day. We did get one question in the chat. I think is something, Mike, it's in your wheelhouse, but Ben asks us, he says he's seen several expos from concerned residents regarding ongoing demonstrations in Arizona. Do we have any updates on this? Do we know if they're receiving outside funding or organizing? What's your take on that, Mike?
Yeah, I do have some additional details that appear in this morning's report. Bottom line is anti-ICE protests have grown more unruly over the past week. We saw videos from police in Phoenix, Arizona, clad in riot gear and forming skirmish lines against protesters. I think they ended up using some chemical agents also to disperse protesters. In Glendale, Arizona, a police cruiser was stolen over the weekend. Protesters have also been lighting fireworks and damaged several police vehicles. And also in Los Angeles, it's another hotspot for anti-ICE activity. Teachers and students for I think all this week now, teachers and students at least 5, maybe up to 7 or 8 now Los Angeles area high schools have conducted walkouts in order to protest against the Trump administration's immigration enforcement policies. So yeah, the anti-ICE stuff is really starting to heat up, specifically in the American Southwest.
All right. Thank you, Mike. All right. Well, that does it for our questions and for today's briefing. As always, you can expect today's report in your inbox later today. We will also be back with you for today's roundtable at 10 Central Time. We'll be addressing several questions we were unable to get to during the show and talking at length about some of the most important items that have been taking place during this week. Please join us there. Again, that is going to be at 10 Central Time. And then we'll also be back next Monday at 08 Central Time, the usual time. So please tune in then. But thank you again for listening to today's briefing. Thank you for all your support. And as always, stay out front.